tasteful to do that kind of stuff, especially if you're going to claim you're a journalist to another journalist. I believe that at least in the media aspect, most journalists are kind of have somewhat of a level ground respect for each other, depending on how they write and what they think.
Absolutely. I mean, look, even people who have very different ideological positions have a bare minimum of professional courtesy for one another on the whole. Now, what I've noticed in these women who claim to be journalists yet, have quite elusive bylines. I can't find any staff jobs they've ever held down anywhere. And we saw this with the Red Plague, whose name shall not be mentioned. And we saw it again with Brianna, is that these people who claim that they're journalists in order to gift themselves some sort of authority in the discussion, as if they can just say it and that makes it true and makes their opinion more important, the fact that they might once have written for somebody. That's not quite my definition of a former journalist, never mind. What we've seen is that they drop this into conversation to give themselves extra moral and professional authority, and then proceed to undermine the journalistic credentials of real reporters who are trying to interrogate their claims. Now, it's a pattern. We see it happen over and over again, only ever really in one direction of this debate. But it's something that listeners should look out for, because it does always seem to follow the same, as I say, the same pattern.
Right. You're absolutely right. It's odd. It's hilarious that it happens, and it's odd at the same time, but I feel more that they burn themselves than they do anything else. Lately, I've seen a lot of things. There was About You, at least, they coming out, and I don't know why. I'm assuming it's probably her, but another follower of hers was a lawyer who wanted to talk about the legal matters involving Breitbart and stuff like that, and Brianna Wu.
Well, I'm very happy to answer anything.
Right.
If I'm able to answer it, if I'm in a position to answer it, I'm very happy to answer it.
I don't know if I'm going to bring him on yet. I can't tell. He was in an argument with Gemma. I don't know if you remember who she was. She was on Huffington Post.
Vaguely.
She was on the Huffington Post live show doing as the
They bumped me from the show. I don't know why. I don't know who said what, but I got an email from about 20 minutes before saying we won't need you after all. I said, oh, whatever.
I can explain that. We all got an email, me and Oliver. The reason why, and they told Frederick, I feel that it was more so towards Frederick, and he passed it on to us, was because they asked him who he wanted on. He said Milo, Adam Baldwin, KingofPol, Internet Aristocrat, Oliver Campbell, and Sargon, and they said no to all of us, and the reason why is because they wanted to control the narrative, and they did not want people who were extreme leaning to the pro side, and then they brought him on to basically kind of try to slander him, though it didn't work. They wanted Eric Kane as the neutral.
I see. Well, I mean, I have no problem with Eric. I think he's a pretty good guy. He's doing a reasonably good job, all told. What's interesting, though, and you have to give NPR credit, and I would never have expected this from NPR. I mean, say what you want about them, and they do have a habit of uncritically siding with the, if you like, the SJW side of things. Like the BBC, it's one of those sort of national public broadcasters paid for by the state, which tends to only really reflect 50% of taxpayers' opinions. But they did a very reasonable job. I know some people are upset that I wasn't given more time to speak, and that there was only one person from the pro Gamergate side, but with the callers they had, I thought they did a very good job and on point. So I encourage people to go and listen to that. It's still online if you haven't heard it yet.
We did listen to it, actually. A lot of people didn't like the fact they seemed like they were kind of trying to do a 4-on-1 on you. And especially when he brought up the blackface thing.
No, it did seem a bit unfair because, I could have taken on at least 10. But no, I'm a big boy. I can look after myself. I don't care about stuff like that.
But it was, a lot of people didn't like that, and the fact that they tried to use blackface as an example of the Gamergate stuff, which you tackled that very well, I would say. It was very hilarious.
Well, thanks.
But yeah, I don't know. Thank you very much, Milo. I'm sure you're very tired. I don't know what time it is over there. Do you have any more questions or anything like that, or any more discussion?
No, it's nearly 1 o'clock. Well, no, I'm grateful to you for having me on. Yeah, I sort of don't want to give too much away because, like I say, I was going to let this one go, but actually, right. My interest has been renewed, so you can keep an eye on Breitbart, and you can keep an eye on the David Paxman thing I'll do tomorrow as well. Yeah, the reason to do this, and I just want to be completely clear about the motivations, because I know that other people from the other side of the debate will be listening to this too, and I don't want this to be inaccurately, unfairly characterized as anything personal. It isn't personal. I was perfectly happy to drop this situation, but when a very prominent voice on the other side of the debate is repeatedly shown to tell lies, which is a serious thing to accuse somebody of, is repeatedly shown to tell lies, it casts doubt on their other claims. And when those other claims are, one of 2 or 3 central battering rams with which one side of a debate attempts to bully and shame the other side into submission and silence, it becomes pertinent. It's also pertinent because similar sorts of personalities, these sort of these women with these very unconventional backgrounds, it seems to be a pattern on that side. They all sort of make the same sorts of claims about the same sorts of threats. We saw this with Zoe Quinn, as I think your listeners will probably intuit that I'm referring to. And I think it's pertinent if these women are shown repeatedly to be pathologically untruthful. There becomes a strong case for journalists looking into their claims to do a lot more fact-checking before credulously reporting on them. So that's the purpose of this. It's not a personal thing. It's simply that this is a woman who makes repeatedly untrue claims about all manner of different things, whose behavior does not reflect the expectations that any journalist or law enforcement professional would have in the situation that she's in, who misrepresents and manipulates data and dates and facts to damage people for her own ideological agenda. And all of these things, I think most journalists would agree, are worthy of further investigation. So that's what I'll be doing over the course of the next week or so. Thanks very much for having me.
Just one more question. I don't mean to interrupt.
Sure.
I was curious, when she mentions a lot about how there's still problems, or actually I should say David mentioned that the broader spectrum of women in the workforce and stuff like that, especially in journalism, and she kind of brought that up a little bit. Would there any account, as you as a journalist as well, especially at Breitbart, for instance, is there ever an issue with women getting a job in the journalist industry as well, in the media industry, as she puts it?
I think you'd find gaming, technology, and journalism aren't the worst professions. Indeed, I think the technology industry broadly, and as you know, I've only got a couple of months of experience in the gaming industry. The technology industry broadly is a fantastic place for women. It's somewhere actually that over-prioritizes hiring women because it feels incredibly guilty and has got this sort of middle-class white guilt paralysis about women in tech, sort of constant money being spent on trying to get as many girls as possible into tech when the girls are really just want to go and do something else. But for technology, certainly I think is a great profession. Journalism, I think, is a great profession for women to go in and is very welcoming of women. If you look at, just look for yourselves at the political positioning of all of the reporters that have been reporting about Gamergate. The opinions they have about women, equality, and all the rest of it, and ask yourselves, is this a welcoming place for women? Of course it is. Because these men all feel incredibly guilty about the fact that they've got, that they're in the jobs they are, which is in many cases absurd, and in some cases not. Some of these men really are as incompetent as they secretly suspect they are. But no, I think journalism, and my hunch is that gaming is very male-dominated for the simple reason that it's a job that men want to do and women tend not to want to do. I don't think it's fair to say journalism is a horribly hostile place for women, although it is true that a lot more journalists are men than are women. If you want to look at real hostile work environments for women, then you look at, finance, the law, banking, that sort of thing. Or if you want to really actually grow up and help women who are genuinely suffering, if you want to really consider the position of women in the world who need our help, then we look over to places like Saudi Arabia, where they can't vote, they can't drive, they can't do anything without a man with them. That's what discrimination looks like. Right. Not, this nonsense that gets, that we get
first world problems. Right.
Exactly. I have very limited sympathy and very limited time for these first world problems. I much
agree.
prefer to focus on the plight of, women and female genital mutilation wherever it occurs, but mainly now it's mainly an African problem. The rights of women, whether they're political or social rights in the Middle East, these are places where feminist energy and activity could be very usefully deployed to make millions of women's lives better, rather than making a couple of 100,000 men's lives worse, which is what the feminists are focusing on.
And sadly, I brought up that same discussion on one of my streams before, calling out Leah Alexandra on a piece that she wrote not too long ago. And her response, actually, as she was watching that, was to tweet me something that she approved, which was calling Bill Maher and any right-winger Islamophobics, and thought it was cute after blocking right afterwards, saying I was uneducated. So I have called him out on the same thing. I said, if you really cared, you'd go think of places like Somalia or Saudi Arabia, where these are real issues. If you really are about feminism and about women's rights, you'll care about this stuff.
And the absurdity is, there's so much cognitive dissonance that goes on, politically speaking, for these sort of far-left authoritarian nutcases. That they hate authority, they hate their parents, they hate their countries, they hate their, everything so much that they sort of instinctively, reactively side, for example, with, I don't know, Palestine, in the Israel-Palestine conflict, right? They see Israel as a sort of a symbol of, of the same sorts of things they don't like about their own government in America and their own society in America. They see it as a sort of, right-wing bully and all the rest of it. They side with Palestine, a country that would, have them hanging from cranes. So when you see these queers for Palestine, you sometimes see you sometimes see this in marches. These feminists who you'll see occasionally have a little ribbon on their avatar in support of Palestine. Countries where not just Hamas but ordinary people have the opinion that that homosexuality is unacceptable and women should stay at home and shut the fuck up. They just have such little grasp on the real problems out there in the world, and this sort of faux academic fury with which they take to the internet. It's sort of laughable, or at least it would be if it didn't have such potentially negative consequences on the rest of us, which is why I think so many of us are angry.
I definitely agree. Well, thank you very much, Milo. I just want to finish up by saying I don't know if you know who Professor Greg Lisby is. I did tweet to you about it with a picture. I am in discussion.
Yes, I do know who he is. He seems great.
Yeah, I'm in discussion with him now to try to bring him on the show, and I would like to have you and probably Eric Kane as a journalist to come on with him. I was going to talk to you later.
No, that sounds lovely. When are you thinking of doing that?
Whenever he's ready. Same thing with Christina Summers. It's this Thursday with her, but whenever he's ready and I can get him more tied down.
Sure. Well, I would. I'd love to, because he seems like a very sensible chap. So thanks so much for having me, and I will see all you guys soon.
All right, take it easy, Milo. Thank you.
Take care. Cheers. Bye.